Welcome everybody to the Never Chalk podcast, where it is never chalked. This is episode 2, where we are going to be covering the post-Major 5, pre-COD Champs 2023, and everything in between that's been happening over the past week. I'm joined by Voltz and Klay, my fellow members of TGE. And first things first, we're going to get started, like I said, talking about Major 5, which was probably the most bizarre one we've had this season. I would say, Voltz, let's start us off here. I mean, just first of all, taking a look at the bracket, obviously NYSL winning isn't necessarily like a surprise because they've been a good team all year, but there was a lot of, crazy stuff that went down.
Yeah, okay, so obviously the first thing we want to point out is OpTic just got steamrolled, right? I mean, it wasn't even close. They didn't look anything like they have in the past couple majors for one. Definitely didn't look like what they do online. And of course, there's been the accusations of that OpTic are just online warriors. I feel like they've already disproven that before. Overall, I would just say that was just a terrible showing by them. I know Ghosty kind of came out and said that he was sick and it was kind of the worst that he's felt in a while. Hook just recently came out and said that he had COVID. I don't know if that was a factor while he was there, if he was also feeling sick. And just an overall poor showing from OpTic, which is just unfortunate because, we had talked about on the previous episode how this was arguably a must win, and to go up top 12 is just absurd. I mean, for lack of a better word, it was just surprising, and I was at a loss for words when it happened. And then looking at the rest of the bracket, I mean, to me, a majority of it kind of played out, the rest of it anyways, how you kind of thought it would. I know Rocker went pretty far. They were looking hot going in, though. And of course, London beat Boston, which was, we would all agree was an upset, but, hey, is what it is. They had to at least get one, right? And on a good note. It was sad to see what happened to the Legion, but it was kind of what I personally expected. That was right where I said they would lose in my bracket predictions. And I think it was the subliners in my bracket prediction, believe it or not. But yeah, it just, other than that, it looked like it pretty much played out exactly how we would think it would happen. And then Drew, I know you and I kind of talked about it was like off the record, off the books, but I had mentioned that the subliners would be my dark horse going into champs. And like, if I had to pick one, they end up winning Major 5. So not a bad prediction on my behalf, I would say.
No,
but other than that, man, I mean, it was a fun major, I would say. Just unexpected with OpTic. But man, what a blast to watch, especially the finals. That was arguably a series of the year.
No, I was obviously, we got our first best of 7 actually going the distance, so definitely was enjoyable for sure. Klay, so this actually, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, this major had the most 3-0 sweeps of all the majors. I want to say not just this year, but of any tournament using this format in the CDL. Do you think there's any sort of reasoning for why teams were getting swept left and right, or, what do you have to say about that?
I don't think there was really any reasoning. I just think some teams came out and underperformed than normal. Like, they just weren't ready to play on LAN, I guess. I'm still very, very surprised that New York came out and won the whole thing. I did not expect that at all. I don't think anybody really expected that. I'm pretty sure they 3-0'd everybody except for Ultra and obviously Grand Finals. So that was pretty amazing to see that losers run.
Yeah, I mean, they, you can look at it and be like, it was one of the more easy losers runs ever, considering their first 3 matchups were against teams not going to champs. although in the case of Vegas Legion, that was a do or die match for them to even have a chance at going to champs. So I think 3-0ing them was a big shock. 3-0ing Florida, who, I mean, they kicked the crap out of OpTic, let's be honest here. 3-0ing them was a surprise. And then I don't know what the hell happened. Like, Minnesota came into this tournament so hot, then they get to winners finals and losers finals and
shit the bed
and get smacked and get sent back down to earth. I mean, I think it's impressive from the subliners, no doubt. I'll admit they proved me wrong. I'd wrote an article at Breaking Point saying, talking about our our hot takes for the rest of the season. I said NYSL had peaked at Major 1. They weren't going to win another one this year. They go out and do that. So props to them on doing that. But I mean, you just look like, I got to hear your guys' reaction to this. You look at the teams that finished 9 through 12. OpTic, Boston, Seattle, and then, I mean, Gorillas, that's not really unexpected. But 3 teams that are going to champs finished without a win at this tournament. Do you think they're just like, screw it, we don't care about this tournament, or they just came out and had bad matchups, or what?
I might be trolling with this take, but maybe they were thinking, like, how whenever a team wins one major that they don't win anything for the rest of the year. Maybe they were kind of thinking about that in the back of their head a little bit. I don't know.
What about you, Voltz?
Man, I mean, Klay, yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thought process. You got to kind of think, right? I mean, it's like going into it, how would you be thinking? And, you're in that situation. Obviously, we talked a little bit about OpTic. They said they weren't feeling well, at least, maybe a guy or two over there. They've come out and admitted that they just didn't, feel well as a team going into it, that they just, they seemed off. Surge getting 3-0'd. Yeah, that's a little crazy, but we kind of, we gonna go in and we see all the rumors, we hear all the OpTic pred chants and yada yada, and you got to think that's probably finally just weighing on the teammates and just, you know what I mean? And like you said, Gorillas, that's not necessarily a shock, especially because they went up against the subliners. And then Breach going out. I don't even know what's going on with the Boston Breach, man. I mean, some days they can pretty much look borderline unstoppable, and then other days it's just that, they're losing to the London Royal Ravens. So
for their first, by the way, that was London's first and only win on land in the 2022-2023 CDL
Congrats
season.
to them. They looked amazing too.
But that low key is kind of like a Boston Breach thing to do.
Yeah, it is.
It's there's some days where it's like they'll come out and just pretty much look like they can beat anybody on the planet, and then that happens. So I would say they're probably the most inconsistent team out of all the champs, all the teams going to champs right now.
I agree 100%.
But I mean, man, it's like you've got to debate. Yeah, the mentality is probably there where it's like, does this really mean much? But you do look at it and it's like OpTic was 15 points away from having the first overall seed, so they had something to play for. Seattle, borderline, could have gotten knocked out of champs contention had Vegas made a run. They had something to play for. Boston, did they clinch before they got to Major 5? I don't think they did.
No,
Right?
they
Major
clinched
5.
at Major 5 when...
No, I think they clinched during the qualifiers.
Did they?
Because
I don't
they didn't
think
win.
so.
They didn't
No,
win a
'cause
single round.
4 teams going into Major 5 had to hadn't clinched yet.
I think a team won and it made it to where they got into the champs run.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's just talk both ways for a second then. Let's say they did. Okay. Let's say they did clinch before they went. I don't remember. I can't really remember, but let's say they did. Then, yeah, I'd understand kind of going in there having the mindset of it's like, well, we don't have nothing to play for. Let's just prepare for champs, right? But if they didn't, they had something to play for. So 3 out of your teams that lost 9 through 12 had something to play for. So the mentality should have been, we need to make at least some sort of noise here at the major. And that just didn't happen. So I just think, at the end of the day, they got outplayed. They weren't ready. They just, they didn't show up. And, unfortunately, sometimes that just happens. That's the world of sports. Esports is included in that. Some days you're not feeling like yourself.
Some days you're not that guy, pal.
You're just not that guy, pal. But, I haven't really competed much or anything like that, but I know I have my good days and I have my bad days. And man, it's just sometimes teams, even when you're in champs contention, you just don't have your days. And, OpTic, Breach, Surge, it just wasn't their major. At the end of the day is kind of how I see it. And, to me, the mindset just needs to shift. All right, accept that. And now let's focus on champs.
Yeah.
Let's be honest with Surge, though. They haven't won like a single LAN match. I think their last one was LAG Major 1. So I don't really expect them to win anything.
I was going to say, they made grand finals at Major 1, and then ever since, I think the only team they've beaten on LAN has been LAG.
Yeah.
But they haven't gone any further than like a lim round 1 or a lim round 2 or something like that. It has been an abysmal, that's why I said,
I thought OpTic played them in Elim round 3.
It might have been something
in
like
Texas. So Major 3?
It might have been like something like that in Major 3. But regardless, they have not made it close to grand finals since Major 1. Which for that team, the talent they have over there, I mean, we've already kind of hinted at this. We all know why they're not competing with the big dogs. But moving on to our next topic, because I think it was funny that y'all were putting such an emphasis on Boston Breach, because the next thing I wanted to talk about, it actually just got officially confirmed today. There was rumors going around about 2 days ago, but yet again, the Boston Breach have decided to make a roster move. They are elevating Snoopy, who just got brought into the academy team, by the way. They're putting him up on the main roster, and I don't know if Vivid got cut or benched or whatever it was, but so now Boston is going into champs, winners round 1, taking on OpTic Texas, by the way, with a roster of Kremp, Snoopy, Awakening, and Beans. One guy has lasted on the roster the entire season. Granted, Method's retired, I get that. But, Klay, first of all, what do you think of the roster move? But then, I mean, are they setting this kid up for failure? Are they is this a good opportunity for him? Like, what do you think about this?
Well, I personally think that he will stay on the roster with the next season, which will be Modern Warfare 3. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I mean, he could come out and have a stinker, like a 0.5 or something, but he could also come out and drop like crazy numbers. We never know. Like, we've seen Boston destroy OpTic before. It could happen again. But I don't think this is a very good move due to them making it like right after Major 5. Like, I'm pretty sure somewhere in the rules that there's supposed to be some sort of roster lock, and the next person that should be coming up is Nero, because he is technically still a substitute. So I don't really like the move too much.
I mean, to think about it like that, I mean, on top of the fact that, if they were going to make a move, it could have been for Nero, who's, like you said, still a substitute. But then if you go and look at the other people on that academy roster, you got guys like Sensor, Shawnee, who Shawnee's been in the CDL, but him and Sensor have been competing for Boston Academy all season. You got Pentagram, who joined, I think, around like mid-season, but this is a guy who, I mean, he's been frying at the SMG position, and they go and they elevate the newest member of the academy roster to the main roster. I mean, like, Voltz, if you were in that situation, I know you said, you don't have a whole lot of competitive experience or whatever, but you've been a competitor in basketball. Like you said, you've played in college before. Like, if some random guy got brought onto the team and instantly got bumped up to being a starter, would you take that personally at all?
Oh, man, that's a good question.
That is a really good question.
I mean, well, let me just say this. First, I'm not even going to lie. It's probably because I haven't kept up much with challengers, but I've never heard of Snoopy. And no disrespect to him, I just haven't heard of him. And when I heard the news, I was just a little shocked when, like you said, you had Nero sitting over there. And then I just also want to touch, like, what a way to start out as a rookie to your first starting experience in the CDL is against OpTic Texas on land in four champs, like at champs, like it's at champs in Vegas.
It's the biggest tournament
like,
of this year.
You can't tell me, like, no matter what happens after this, like, this kid probably will never be rattled in his life ever again for whatever happens. Like, they win, they lose, he gets haggled by the fans, whatever. I guarantee you this kid will never be rattled on land for the rest of his life after this. But as far as, like, the perspective of, I'm glad you touched on Pentagram, because Pentagram's been, like, oh my goodness, how long has he been in challengers and a substitute and just has not gotten called up yet, right?
I mean, the past 2 or 3 years, he was the official substitute for the Thieves last year. So
yeah, exactly.
Technically, he got a ring out of that. But, like, you know, when you're a competitor, you want to earn that shit. You don't want to just sit on the bench and get it, you know, for free.
And just speaking from, like, a perspective from him, yeah, it does kind of suck. That's, like, the newest guy that, like, just joined. So, like, you brought up basketball. It's like somebody came from a transfer portal and just, like, immediately starts. And, like, this is a new guy, technically hasn't proven himself in anything, right? In terms of, like, what we're talking about here, like I said, I don't know too much about Snoopy, and I'm not going to act like I'm an expert or anything. This is strictly from the perspective of, like, being a teammate. Like, I've been here, I've done that, I've been competing for a long time. And I felt like I've earned my spot. Yeah, I'd be a little upset about that, right? I mean, I feel like anybody would, especially a natural competitor, somebody that is giving it all every day and still has yet to get their shot. That stings a little bit, man. I'm not gonna lie. Like, yeah, I'd be decently upset about something like that. But man, all I gotta say is good luck to Snoopy. Like, that is an incredible task at hand. To your first ever land start in the CDL is going to be against OpTic Texas at champs in Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is one of those situations where he's either going to be the next big thing because he shows out and no one expects him to, or all of a sudden he's sent right back down to the academy for next year and everyone's just going to be like, what the hell were you guys thinking? But Boston has made so many moves, especially at the SMG spot this season, that at this point we should have been expecting something. I don't know what their thought process has been this year, but it certainly has been interesting to say the least. So I know you guys, or I know you said, you don't keep up a whole lot with challengers or anything, but something that became a big deal following Major 5 and the Challengers Open at Major 5 was all of a sudden rosters were moving around, players were switching teams just for the sake of being able to have their team qualify for Challengers champs. Do you think that, like, for both the CDL and for Challengers, like, a roster lock needs to be instituted well earlier so that you don't just switch teams and then auto qualify? Or what do you guys think of that whole situation? Because I know how I feel, but Klay, I want to know what you think about that.
Well, I think I've I don't know if I should probably go over it again, but I think Major 4 a roster lock should definitely happen. I don't think that you should go that long with needing to know if you need to change your roster. Like, after Major 3, if you place like top 12, you need to do something. Like, and I'm pretty sure Seattle, they placed top 12, right? Or am I
You're talking
mistaken?
about Major 3?
Yeah, I think so.
I believe I believe you're right
See-
about that.
See, like a team like that, if they don't change after that major and they wait till like major 5, like Boston, and they're like, oh, we need to do something, and they go and dip into challengers and pull up somebody like who's a good person, like Gwen. Do y'all know who that is?
Mhm.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Like they say, oh, we want him, and
He's their substitute, actually.
Oh, he
He's
is?
Seattle. He is.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Gwen
Who's
is
somebody
Seattle's
else?
sub.
Somebody
Uh,
else. Dang,
Another
I can't.
good
I
challenger.
can't think
I
of
mean,
anybody.
the freaking Abuso or whatever his name is. The
Yeah,
guy
him.
on.
So they
Abusa,
say that they want him. They should not be able to go into challengers and get him. I think they should go through the rest of the year and probably place top 12 and major 5, and then top 8 at champs. Like they should not be able to change that at all.
Voltz, what about you? Do you think that like players, for the sake of trying to auto qualify with pro points for challengers champs, do you think they should be allowed to switch teams right after the last regular season, main event, if you will, before champs? Do you think that's acceptable?
So I'm just going to start by saying I'm going to pretty much speak on like from the standpoint of how other professional sports work. So I think first we would need to like identify with what level does challengers technically qualify as. Would this be like semi-pro, or what is this exactly, right? Because it's like at the professional scene, you got the NFL, the NBA, you have at some point during the season where it's like trades can't happen, and the only thing that you can do is pretty much sign certain free agents or things like that. There is a point where it's basically like, in other words, like roster lock, right? Well, what is challengers? What is that? I mean, I know just from watching the little bit that I do that roster changes happen all the time in challengers. So, it's like, who's to say when is that really supposed to stop or lock? Because at that point, it's like, okay, are we also going to at least call challengers like the semi-pro level, where it's like they do need to have a roster lock at some point? And if so, I would be an advocate on it needs to be relatively early. Like I would say mid-season, you need to have your roster locked. But if we're not, then it's like it's not semi-pro. It's just another way for just people to get discovered, maybe, I guess, or just for people to compete when they don't have anything else to do. Then honestly, why even have a roster lock? Like it to me, it's just like it's going to happen. They change teams, change players all the time from what I've seen, like all year long. So to me, there'd be almost no point in doing a roster lock. And I get it. It does seem a little like slimy to do, where it's like, oh man, I'm not going to qualify for champs. Let me just go get with this guy, and this guy. We'll go to this org, and then we'll qualify for champs. But I mean, to me, it starts with like, what are we going to start treating challengers? Is that going to be like the semi-pro of the CDL, where in a way it's like the G League in the NBA? It's like, if we do it that way, then I would understand there needs to be a roster lock. And to me personally, somewhere around mid-season where it's like roster lock, and the only way that CDL teams can call up the player is if they're on as a substitute. You've signed them, and they can't just go pick up one. So,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and something we could go on and on about, and maybe cover in another episode. Like, where exactly should challengers stand in the whole? Is it the minor league? The AAA to the MLB, or the AHL to the NHL? Yeah, I think that's a whole different conversation we could have. Personally, I think it's scammy that players can just like look at their pro points by the end of the season, and if their current roster doesn't have enough to qualify, or like that current roster didn't perform well enough, they can go and find a team where, oh, if I go and join them and my pro points will add up, will auto qualify. Like, I think that's scammy as hell, but like you said, where exactly does challenger stand in the grand scheme of things? But I think moving on to our last topic of this episode, this is where we're gonna have a little bit of fun, a little bit of prediction time. Champs is coming up in 2 weeks, which is really hard to believe. And then that's it for the MW2 season. We have, 8 teams out of the 12. We could talk about whether all 12 deserve to qualify another time. But the way it is, we got the 8 teams. We've got all of our teams starting in winners. So there's no, being single limbed out of this. You got to it's all double elimination. So our matchups, we've got Atlanta FaZe versus Seattle Surge, Toronto Ultra versus Los Angeles Thieves, OpTic Texas versus Boston Breach, and New York Subliners versus Minnesota Rocker. Which of those first round matchups, first of all, do you think is the most interesting? Will be probably the closest, if you will. And then if any, do you think any of them are just going to be a piece of cake? That team's definitely advancing. We'll start with Klay again.
If OpTic comes out and looks like their normal self, I think that they steamroll Boston. And based off of last major, I think New York absolutely destroys Rocker. That could be a little bit biased off of what just happened, but I think Atlanta and Surge is probably going to be the best match of that day, and followed up behind Ultra and Thieves. But y'all could go ahead.
Yeah, no, Voltz, on to you.
Well, okay, so to me, I think it's obvious the match of the day that day is going to be Ultra Thieves. And that could go either way, especially what we just saw on LAN. There was a lot of shit talk going on.
Yep.
And it was just entertaining to watch regardless of whatever the score was. I think it's going to be very entertaining to watch this time around. I will give you guys a hot take. I think, and you guys are going to hear it here first, but this is just what I personally think is going to happen. I think Surge knocks FaZe down to losers in winners round 1. Reason being, Surge typically has FaZe's number, and I just have a funny feeling. I'll just say it that way. I have a funny feeling. I think Surge knocks FaZe down to losers. Surge moves on. And other than that, the bracket probably plays out pretty much how you expect. Subliners, OpTic, and it's kind of a coin toss between Ultra and Thieves. I think maybe Thieves kind of get it this time around.
I can think of one team that's praying that your prediction doesn't happen, and that being OpTic Texas. Because let's be real here. If they come out and they look normal, they don't look like they did in Major 5, their path to grand finals is extremely favorable for them, considering how they've played these teams throughout the season. Boston, they've gone back and forth with, but you got that roster move. Boston just hasn't looked good other than in control over the last, 2 or 3 majors, whereas OpTic, typically their best modes are hardpoint and search. So I think that's a good matchup for them. Assuming the Subliners beats Rocker, going off of what you said, Klay, OpTic has played New York very well this season also. And then at that point, they're hoping they get FaZe in that winners finals, because for whatever reason, the team that has
OpTic has always had FaZe.
Every event this year cannot beat OpTic, or even play them really close for that matter. I think the bottom part of the bracket is certainly a lot easier than the top part. FaZe and Surge, Ultra and Thieves. I think regardless of who you get in that winners round 2, it's gonna be
a good match.
For sure. Do you think any of these teams? First of all, I'll go back to you, Klay. Do you think whoever wins champs, is it gonna be the team that goes through winners, or do you think someone has it in them to make a losers bracket run?
In my opinion, I have Ultra losing to Thieves. I don't want that to happen, but I just feel like Draws is going to come out differently after what just happened at Major 5. And I think Ultra makes a run all the way to grand finals, and I think it's going to be OpTic and Ultra.
You think OpTic Ultra is going to be the grand finals? All right. Voltz, what about you?
So I will say this. I'm not gonna make a prediction on who wins the whole thing.
No, you don't have to do that.
I'm not gonna do that.
I'm not
but
doing
what I
that
will
either.
say is, I do think whoever makes it out of winners takes this whole thing. You have the veto advantage, and it's a best of 9 now.
Yes,
But
grand finals is best
there
of
wouldn't
9.
be no vetoes then, right? Because
You get one
I
veto,
think there's
right?
like one. Yeah, you
Yeah, I
get
think-
one map veto
you get
or something
you
like
get
that.
the one, and to me, I mean, that can literally make a difference. You can literally pick your worst map and not play it. And you pretty much play everything else. And so I think winners, I think whoever makes it out of winners will probably win the whole thing. Obviously, I think any of the top 5 are very capable of even losing winners round 1 and going and winning the whole thing. But to me, I just don't see that happening. I think whoever makes it out of winners finals ends up winning grand finals.
All right.
I think I
Well,
agree with you,
Yeah, I mean,
but
if
I
you
don't
look at
want
the
to make my prediction because I don't want
Right,
to jinx
right.
it.
I feel that. Look, hey,
I
OpTic
think we're
fans
all thinking the
probably-
same thing, though.
OpTic fans probably hate me at this point. From Major 3, Major 4, and Major 5, I had picked them to win it just because
Let's not do that this time.
Major 3...
Yeah, you might need to change the juju there,
I was
brother.
going to say, Major 3 was maybe a little questionable, but it was their home major. And
Yeah.
then going into Major 4 and 5, they were very clearly the best team, at least in the qualifiers. And then, they get second and they get top 12. So,
Yeah.
maybe I'm the problem here. Maybe I need to stop predicting them. Regardless, even though people are still upset about not all the teams getting to compete, I think we've got the best case scenario here with the teams that are competing. These have very clearly been the best, 8, if you will. I mean, you could argue I keep saying Paris. You could argue Vegas, but they really didn't turn things around until like mid-season.
When they picked up Sandy.
Exactly. Picking up Standy was the biggest thing, and I think they definitely need to think
Almost
about keeping
turned
him.
their entire season around, man. I
know.
mean,
It was
seriously.
just a little bit too
They were
late.
close. They were close.
Yeah, a little too late. Definitely tippable out of them, or out of him specifically. I think he's definitely earned his spot on whether it's that roster or a
Or
different
just any
one.
roster.
He definitely
He's
showed
a really
his
good
worth.
player.
100%. But I think champs, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I love it that everyone gets that double elimination chance. There's no people starting in losers. And I just can't believe we're already at the end of the season. It's crazy. I still remember going to Major 1 here in Raleigh in December, and now we're about to be done with the year. So I don't know if anyone has any last words regarding, if you have anything you want to say about how the season went, or how, anything more about champs. I don't know if anyone has any more to say. I'll leave that up to y'all.
No, I mean, I do think champs is going to be a lot of fun. I think this overall was a very fun season, and the fact that we're here at champs now, and we've all pretty much said it. Any of the top 5 teams could win it. You couldn't ask more for as a fan. It's a toss up, man. There's no clear cut favorite in my eyes, so it'll be a lot of fun to see how it shakes up.
Agreed.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all it is. I think top 5, any of them can win. But that's going to do it for episode 2 of Never Chalked, where, as we say, it is truly never chalked. I'm PescaroDB. That's Voltz. That's Klay. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content. And be sure to follow TG on all other social platforms as well. We'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.